Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another season, I guess I should say, of Business Of series here at Barton College School of Business and Innovation. We're excited to have another season for you this year. And this season, the first episode is going to be with Bobby McNeil. Now, we'll tell you who Bobby McNeil is in just a moment if you don't already know him, but we're excited because we're talking about the business of standing out and what that means. So welcome again to Barton College School of Business and Innovation's Business Of series, Season 2. Bobby McNeil is with us today. So Bobby, tell people who you are.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me. I think this is great. My name is Bobby McNeil. I am a alum of Barton College. I graduated in 2007.
2007. I wonder why that's significant.
Yeah. So that was my senior year, and I was on the NCAA Division II National Championship team. They won the big one. Got the ring here.
We've got to show the ring.
Yeah,
we've got to show the ring.
Yeah, got the ring here.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest accomplishments in my life.
Yes.
That was my senior year. That was, a great way to, kind of go out. I graduated cum laude. I was a business administration major when I was there. Really involved in a lot of different organizations and clubs while I was there. And then from there, I started a career in talent acquisition. So I've been in talent acquisition for about, I would say like 17 years now. And I worked across a lot of different industries. Early on, I worked in like kind of consulting, working at like different like, staffing agencies and things like that. Was able to, work my way up the ranks. I was one of the top recruiters in the country. At one agency, I was one of the top recruiters in the region, in the Southeast, and built a name for myself continuously in the Raleigh-Durham area in the employment, career space. And then went over to the tech industry where I spent a lot of time there in talent acquisition. And that's really where I really made a name for myself, really, getting out there, and worked at a big tech company. And it's so expansive, easy to kind of be recognized and things like that. And now I'm more of like in the finance industry doing the same thing. Been in talent acquisition leadership for about 5 or 6 years. On the board for, a lot of nonprofit organizations, kind of dealing with like, professionals, helping, kind of bridge the gap between, careers and opportunities for them. So won a lot of awards, been the chapter president for those things. And most recently an author. So I wrote a book called Cracking the Code. It's available everywhere online. Amazon bestseller in the career development category, and just wrapped up the audio book, so that'll be out soon. So I'm really excited about that. We're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of that. So I'll stop there. There's other things I could say, but I'll stop there.
I think that's great. Before I toss it back over to Becky, the term talent acquisition. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for folks that aren't really familiar with that term, over the years it's kind of changed, right? Mm-hmm. When I was at Cisco all those years ago, we called it human capital management, or HCM. Mm-hmm. And even before that, I guess it was called something else. Can you kind of give us a history of that term and what it used to be called and what it's called now?
So to your point, you're exactly right. It was, called, human capital. It's a human resources function. Right. So in human resources, you have different functions, right? You have like, payroll, you have compensation, you have all those different things like employee investigations if there's like an issue. But then you have like recruiting or talent acquisition, right? Mm-hmm. So I like to look at that as that's like the marketing side of HR, right? Mm-hmm. Those other functions I mentioned are more like the back office stuff,
like
right?
Payroll,
very administrative,
benefits,
exactly.
Onboarding and offboarding.
Yeah, exactly. So in recruiting and talent acquisition, you're like the marketing side of HR. Like I like to call it like the fun part of HR, because you're going to all the conferences, the events, you're recruiting people, bringing people into the company. You're like the face of the company, right? Usually they're like, you're the first person people see, and introducing them into the company and the company's culture and things like that. So it's a function of HR. Talent acquisition and recruiting is a little bit different though. So recruiting is about like, filling a position right now. It's really about the short-term need. Talent acquisition is more, it has recruiting, but it's more strategy, whether it's through social media, going to events, going to conferences, putting on events yourself. It's a lot more strategic, and it's all about, the growth of the company from a human perspective.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's go back to basketball. You came to Barton on scholarship, mm-hmm. and you were part of that 2007 championship team. Yeah. How did that experience shape how you lead today?
I learned a lot from athletics, being in, organized sports, or just like kind of like team oriented type things. Mm-hmm. You learn so much, you learn about obviously teamwork, collaboration, discipline, those things definitely translated into my career. When we think about, collaborative, any organization, any company you go to, you're going to have to be part of a team, right? And every team has roles, right? Sometimes you're the leader. Sometimes you're, an executioner, you're like executing a task, right? Sometimes you're a specialist, right? So understanding how that works, right? And then, just the discipline aspect of it. I remember Coach Levency, we were doing like pool workouts at like 5:30 a.m. And then we had to go get like 300 shots, and then you had to get washed up, and then you had to go to the caf and go get breakfast, and then you had to go to class, and then you had to come back and do midday workouts, and you had to go back to class and things like that. Then you had to come and do like a 3-hour practice, right? So you learn discipline and dedication. And no matter if you're an athlete or you're in finance or you're an engineer or you're a techie, those types of soft skills, are going to, definitely take you a long way in life. And also, conflict management. Teammates are great, but sometimes you're not going to always agree on things, right? So being able to kind of keep the big picture in mind and really understanding how to manage relationships, I think, just being on that team, was tremendous, and just hard work. Any of my teammates would tell you, we put in a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And I think that's a lot of time people don't see that, right? They just see the ring, they see the banner in the gym, they see all the news coverage, but that was a lot of hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what took you from basketball and then that path into talent acquisition?
Anybody in like talent acquisition or like recruiting would tell you, like, we just kind of fall into it, right? Yeah. So, I was a star basketball player in high school. In college, I was more of a role player. Basketball was, 100% my passion. And it was something I, love to do and still love to do occasionally when I have time with my busy schedule. I don't play as much as I used to, but
pick up games,
right? If I can fit it in, right? Yeah. I think for me, I always was a continuous learner, right? And I didn't want to be, one-dimensional, right? I knew that, no matter how good you are, there's going to be an end date for that, right? Some end dates come sooner, some end dates come much later. But I wanted to make sure that I wanted to be multifaceted. I don't want to be one-dimensional. So I was, right out of college, just graduated, and just like any other new grad, I'm looking for a job. And I went to a staffing agency in downtown Raleigh, did an interview, and it's like, hey, this kid's very bright. And it's like, oh yeah, he was, I think they're kind of curious about, he was on that championship team, right? So, but I was very curious, very hungry, was trying to get started, and that's really how I ended up doing that, really.
So it sounds like you just kind of found it along the way. It wasn't really part of the plan. What was it about talent that kind of drew you in?
The competition, believe it or not.
Really? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Basketball competition. Okay.
It was the competition. So like when I was early in my career doing like the consulting agency, talent acquisition recruiting, like you work with these like different companies, and they're looking for like these really hard to fill positions. Like I remember one of the first positions I worked on was a Drupal developer. Yeah. So that was like really difficult. But what they do is like, okay, we're going to send it to this recruiter in this agency, and then we're going to send it out to 8 or 9 other recruiters in other agencies. I was like, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to be competitive, right?
See who can get it first. Right?
Exactly. I could get it first and get the best person. But also I knew I wanted to be in business, but I wanted to be involved in business from a corporate standpoint where I kind of had a little bit of touch and feel on everything, right? And in talent acquisition, you have to know what's going on financially. You have to know what's going on, internally. You have to know what's going on in the job market. You have to know what's going on from like business strategy, because all those things come together in finding the right person, right? So I think it was a perfect role for me, even though it just kind of, it really kind of happened right after school, and I kind of ended up, being, one of the best at it. But I think it put me right in the middle of everything. It gave me an opportunity to really help people, right? What we do in talent acquisition, even in a leadership capacity, you're changing people's livelihood, right? And you're making connections, for opportunities that they may have not known existed or they may have not had access to. So I think it was those 3 things.
One of my favorite things is, even though I'm not in talent acquisition, I love it when someone is looking for something and I might know someone, because I have a lot of recruiting talent acquisition friends, is when I hear they're looking for someone and I know someone who's looking, and be like, hey, y'all should talk. It's so fun. So I can see why you enjoy that, because it just makes me happy when they get together and something works out, or maybe it doesn't, but they've made a connection to where in the future it does work out. It's a great feeling to see that connection happen?
Yeah, you're the connector.
Yeah.
Or like what, I think Gen Z says today, you're the plug. Right? So you're the plug, you're the connector, right? So I just love that. And I just like networking and talking.
Yeah. Conversations lead to connections.
That lead to
which
collaboration.
Collaborations.
There you go.
Yeah. That's one of our things we talk about a lot,
We talk
which
a
then
lot
leads
about
to
that,
community.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you wear a lot of hats, actually, not just talent acquisition. So recruiter, author, TEDx speaker, president of Blacks in Technology, RDU. So you've got a lot going on. How do all of those fit together day to day?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I was actually explaining this to somebody a couple of weeks ago, a young man I'm mentoring. I look at it as like a big ecosystem, right? So at the core, my career is, talent acquisition and recruiting, right? So that's like at the core, right? But then everything else that I do around that feeds those things. And in return, those things provide energy back to that, right? So if it wasn't for my career in talent acquisition, I don't become an author, because my book is all about, career advice and real stories of real people that I've come across in my career. The presidency board seats I've had, former chapter president of Blacks in Technology, Raleigh-Durham. We won the Impact Award under my presidency in 2023. And then we won Chapter of the Year in 2024. And there were 80 chapters in 20 countries. So the Raleigh-Durham chapter was Chapter of the Year.
That's great.
amazing.
So that puts it in perspective, right? And I think the way, I led, and the way that, I wanted to impact the members in just the Raleigh-Durham, area from a, economic and career perspective, is that it was at the core of what, what I do every day and my passion, right? So that allowed me to quite literally, kind of open doors for people and make those connections. And then what I'm currently doing now is the VP of Development for National Black MBA, same thing. Right. So it's part of all these things kind of work together. And then, the TED Talk, that I did, months back, the subject matter was all about talent acquisition, not breaking in, but becoming, and, overcoming imposter syndrome, and really how the words we use can reflect our perspective on access. I don't have that story and the richness in that TED Talk if it's not aligned with the core. Right. So I look at it like a big ecosystem, if that makes sense.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that. It's tough. When I've talked to my Black friends about stuff like that, about sometimes you're the only one in the room, or you're going in as the only person in the room. There's a lot to deal with there, with being alone, microaggressions, all the challenges that come along with that. How do you deal with that? And what advice do you give the new folks that you're bringing in to manage things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You want to be your true, authentic self. That's 100% important. But even with the people that I coach and people I mentor, you want to be your best self as well. And your best self is also your authentic self also. Yes, these are real challenges. I would never kind of dismiss that. Even at the evolution and the advancements that we made today in corporate America and in culture, it still exists, unfortunately.
Especially in leadership, because there's, there aren't as many women, especially in leadership, as there are men, and especially Black women. They earn a lot less. They just sometimes are the only woman in the room, much less a Black woman. So I see a lot of discussions around that, and I don't think we should just brush that aside. I think we need to bring it to light and talk about how people navigate that, because there's just so much pressure on everyone anyway.
How I've tried to do it, and what, my mentors who, when I was, in the seat that I'm in now, back, when I was young trying to figure it out, one thing they always told me, and one thing that I still do today, which led me to those different opportunities and kind of really be empowered, is that once you get in the room and you have some influence, try to bring more people in the room so the room feels more familiar and you feel like you have more like-minded people. And I think that's the responsibility of every leader. I think sometimes we look at leaders as, okay, authoritative, right? Do this, do that. They're really, they're trying to influence through command. But, leading through influence and using the opportunities that you have to really make environments more welcoming for people. Because people, at the end of the day, when they walk in these rooms, they're just looking for a familiar face or a familiar spirit. right? Or somebody who they can identify with.
Somebody who hears them.
Exactly.
Right?
Is it okay to be the only person in the room? Yeah, you may feel like, okay, I hit this mountaintop, but yeah, that's great. But also, if you have the influence and you have that opportunity, it is a responsibility as a leader to make the room a little bit more welcoming, right? So when people do come, they see people that they can look up to and people they can identify with.
Amplify those other voices, advocate for them when they're not in the room. Say their name when they're not there so that they get the chance to be in the room next time.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about building your personal brand while you have a full-time role. What do you think is one operational challenge that's unique to that?
One challenge for me is, especially in this digital age, now I know how to, use all the digital applications and things like that and content and things like that. But I think one of the challenges, that I had, early on was really making time for it. You have your day job and then you have your, adult responsibilities and things like that. And I think the challenge for me at one point was like really making time for it. Right. Because there's so many ways, that you can build a digital brand. I call it a digital brand because everything is digital. Right. I was having a conversation with somebody about not only did I think the cover letter is dead, I think business cards are dead. Right. Because people want that digital kind of, representation.
We'll pull up that little LinkedIn QR code, right?
The LinkedIn QR code. So making time for it, but then also finding your voice. And finding your audience. There are people who 100% want to hear what we have to say. And I think because we want to grab those people over there, I think we spend more time trying to influence those instead of the maybe the 100 people that really like our stuff, right? So I always say, be a good steward over the audience you have. And then once you are a good steward over that, it'll grow organically, right? And I think that was one of the challenges that I have, that I had is, number one, making time for it because I'm kind of like a perfectionist. So if it doesn't, I don't think this looks good, right? But sometimes that's the best stuff. The stuff that's not always like cookie cutter perfect.
Yeah.
I think I read something like on like TikTok or something like that. I think the videos that have the most engagement are just like the ones people are just in their car.
Our president, Dr. Searcy, says, never let perfect get in the way of good enough.
Exactly.
And I think that really speaks to what we call the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule that people talk about. Yeah. And you're exactly right.
Yeah. I've had friends that say that too. It's like perfect is the enemy of good enough. I mean, if you sit there and you keep trying to make it perfect, you'll have that failure to launch. You'll never get it done because you're too busy tweaking to. And we know a lot of people who fail to launch a business because of that. They keep trying to get it perfect and they never actually launch whatever it is they're trying to do because they're just so busy tweaking that nothing ever gets done.
You're absolutely right. And especially in this digital age, what you're talking, people just want people who are authentic.
Speaking of having time to do things, you got the personal brand and then you wrote a book. How did you manage to fit that in?
If I can take you on a little bit of a story without being too long. So, I started just writing the book. I didn't even have a publisher when I first started. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to write the book. And, if I get a publisher, great. If not, I'll just self-publish. And again, I didn't know anything about the publication process. I just knew I had a story I wanted to tell. This is the time to do it. So I just started writing. And then about like 3 chapters in is when I actually got a publisher. So then it's time to really go to work, right? Because now you have contracts, you had deadlines and things like that. Again, talking about, what I learned, from playing, basketball at Barton, what I learned from being on the championship team was that discipline. It's like, okay, well, I have, my day job, which is important, but I would spend, like evenings, some days it was just like straight writing. Some days it was planning chapters. So, but I wanted to at least each day do something that was in motion forward. I did go periods of time where I just kind of put the book down and just stopped because you do need that time to kind of just take a break, right? I mean, kind of enjoy life or go to the beach or go to the movies or hang out with your friends and family. So there were days where I just stopped, right? And then I'll pick back up and then, I'll put it back down. But interestingly enough, I was kind of writing the book and writing a TED Talk really at the same time because the book and the TED Talk actually released the same month last year. So it required a lot of like dedication, discipline and sacrifice. Success doesn't come without sacrifice.
Yeah. All that discipline you had as a basketball player probably really helped contribute to that discipline you displayed when you did all of that.
In writing it, I'm going to do this for 2 hours. I'm just going to write for 2 hours. Or even when I did my TED Talk, okay, I'm going to rehearse my lines for like this amount of time and then I'm going to stop. Mm-hmm. Right. So I had like a calendar, like this is what I'm going to, it's like almost like a workout regimen. Yeah. Or even like, when we were like, we had to get like 500 shots up. Like that's just all repetition, because the more you do something, the more it's kind of ingrained in you.
So let's go back to talent acquisition for a second. What was your most profound and maybe even unexpected realization from all these years in talent acquisition?
Compassion and empathy for people, especially in, it's kind of today's job market. And, I've, throughout my 17 years, I've been through a couple, kind of down markets, right? But particularly now, just the empathy and care for people, right? Yes, I'm interviewing people, but also having that kind of humanity piece, right? And even if they, get a favorable outcome and they get an offer, just really treating people well throughout that. But also if they don't, I always pride myself in, I'm going to make sure I get back with you on some sort of status update, even if you didn't get the opportunity, right? And I think doing that with care and sensitivity and empathy, I think that's the biggest lesson, because you don't want to be known as the recruiter that ghosts.
No,
right?
You don't. I hear so many. I see a lot of people complain about that. Like that's the worst, is to just never hear anything. So yeah, I think that's good that you follow up, because people appreciate that. Even if they don't really say anything, there's a lot of people that don't follow up. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing to do for people.
The empathy and just the candidate advocacy. Like you're in a position of advocacy and influence, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we don't make the final hiring decision. I mean, I've actually been a hiring manager in my career before, so I know kind of how that looks. But just the humanity and just the advocacy, I think, is the biggest thing that I've learned.
In your book, you talk about the candidate who cannot be ignored. Mm-hmm. What's a moment from your own career where you were that person, but maybe a little bit before you had the language for it?
Actually, there's a story in my book where I talk about my first like talent acquisition manager interview. Like it was my first like big person, grown person, career opportunity. I say that because, when you're a manager, that yes, you're still doing some recruiting, but then you got to manage budgets, and then you got direct reports, you got to care and nurture them. Mm-hmm. So I remember I talk about it in my book where I had to prepare for this interview. Like, so, and I have a whole chapter based on that, but I was scoping out the interview team on LinkedIn, and I was like, really kind of getting all these little data points about, the audience and who I was going to be in the room with. And I remember, I had recruiting experience, but I hadn't had management experience yet. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't talk about specific experiences where I led a team, but I could talk about how I led through influence and really kind of show, hey, this guy is capable. I knew he was probably going to ask me a question about recruiting strategy, right? So I knew that may be an advantage that I may have over some applicants, possibly, who all they've done is really kind of manage people and their team did the strategy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to come in and talk more about that, right? So I had my whole story set up and, really explained about, hey, I set up these metrics. Hey, I delivered on these things. I even got other people involved, right? So I took him through a whole journey, right? And really kind of also put some of myself into it as well. That really stood out because I remember I said this in the book, like as I was talking him through things, he had his poker face. He was, just couldn't break him. And then once I got towards the end, he kind of had, like a smile and kind of like a nod, like, okay, like this was pretty impressive. So you want to build trust, and then you want to establish credibility, right? So whatever's on your resume, you need to be able to talk about it. And I think, that day for certain, I was definitely able to do that because I ended up getting that job. But also you want to make a connection, right? You want to have that fine balance between, you don't want to be too loose because you don't want to come off as unprofessional, but then you don't want to be too rehearsed because you may come off very stoic and not somebody people can connect with, right?
Cold, huh?
Right. So you want to make a connection. I think those are the three key elements. And I think that's what I learned from that interview, really. And that was like years ago. But I think I carry those things with me, and I've also shared those gems with others.
Great, great. Okay, now we're going to talk about the opposite. Is there a mistake or a setback early on that turned into a crucial learning experience for you?
Right out of college when I was like looking. So I did no prep work for this interview at all. Absolutely no prep work. It was it's like downtown Raleigh. I even forget the name of the company, but I'm going to this interview. I didn't bring any resumes. I didn't prepare at all. I'm just gonna go and just talk. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why, but I go into the interview and I'm already kind of late. I'm like 15 minutes late. Yeah, it's not good. Yeah. I don't call it. Yeah, I know. I'm so ashamed. I'm so much better now, as you can see. But I'm like, man, I don't know why. I was just too loose because I didn't prepare. And I thought I was just going to go in there and just like, I'm just going to talk about stuff I did at school, and I'm just going to call, they're going to recognize me, from the championship. And it's going to be great. People still talking about it. I still go to Wilson. I still get free Parker's barbecue. People, it's going to be great, right? They're going to know me. It's like, didn't work.
All right. So this is the student question.
Thank you for visiting with us. I will try to focus on bringing and not breaking in. And if you can, may you please share a story of when you were my age transitioning from Barton College to life and work beyond Barton College?
I would say for me, I come from a small town, Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina, that many people still don't know and can't pronounce. I went to a small school. Barton College is a small school, right? And I think some of the challenges or even kind of the mental hurdles that you have to, you may deal with, as a young college student, at least at the time, is anybody going to recognize me, right? I don't come from a big city. I don't come from a big, Ivy League school or university. Is anybody going to recognize me, right? So I'll be honest, I had that mentality like, man, I'm not going to be as, sought after or, as good as somebody who may come from a big school, in the UNC system or a Notre Dame or, and all these schools are great. But I had to kind of really shift. And what I wanted to do is say, okay, I did the best I could do with my summers and got really good internships. I was in some student organizations. I achieved a lot academically. That's going to be what I'm going to walk in the room with. Right, is who I am as a person. As I look back, every year of my career and every year of my life, I still focus on that, right? So, and what I've learned is that that's what a lot of people still want, right? Yeah, the name recognition is good, but what have you done that's created impact and value? So I had to shift my mindset to, I'm not breaking into talent acquisition, right? I'm not breaking into authorship. Right. I'm the first one in my family to be an author. I don't have anybody that showed me how to do that. I'm the first one, in my family to even lead in ministry, which a lot of people don't know about. So I didn't have any precedence, but what I had was my inner belief and an understanding of the impact that I made. So each step in my life, I focused on more I'm becoming versus like breaking in. I don't have to break into authorship. I don't have to break into the tech industry. I don't have to break into these things. I'm becoming these things.
That was great.
I've really enjoyed talking with you folks this morning, and it's just been really great to hear the words, because as you said before, words matter, words make a difference. And so what I like to do is, as you guys were talking, I make little word maps. So you talked about being curious. You talked about being a continuous learner. This idea of critical thinking always comes in when I talk to a Barton graduate. It's amazing how consistent and steady being a critical thinker is. And the stories that you were talking about, stories of the journey, makes it easier to understand for folks. If you can put it in the position of a story. You talked about discipline, and you talked about how competition helped you, especially early on as you were trying to make your way. Being authentic, but understanding there's a sacrifice, helping, making connections, making room, being more welcoming, being empathetic, being compassionate, and being an advocate, but also being authentic. You talked about your personal/digital brand and finding your voice. And then I like the last part, this idea of making sure you do your homework. Don't show up unprepared. I still deal with that with undergraduates today, by the way, as dean at the School of Business and Innovation at Barton. It's a real thing, so it's still there. But you also said trust, value, and then impact. I'll close with that. Impact, becoming and not breaking in. I think this has been a great segment, great conversation. Becky, I'll toss it back to you for closing. But Bobby, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find you and grab a copy of Cracking the Code?
Yeah, so I am on social media. You can find me on Instagram. It's just Bobby McNeil Jr. Just put that in. You can find me there. I'm always on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Bobby McNeil. You find me, you'll see my photo there. Just definitely follow and connect. Cracking the Code is available everywhere online where books are sold. So you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on BarnesandNoble.com, Walmart.com, booksamillion.com, wherever books are sold online. And also have a new website, which is BobbyMcNeilJr.com. You can find out everything about me there. So it's just like, kind of just my page. So that's where you can catch me.
Wonderful. Great.
And also look forward to being on campus, here in the future and doing more things in person. So
yeah, I think maybe the idea
we've got you scheduled for this fall. So
yeah,
more
one of the Business 101
Business
courses.
101.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that'll be great to see you as a guest speaker there. I think the students will really benefit from that. And maybe just one more quick thing. If you're in students' shoes today, preparing to enter the workforce or launch a venture, what's one actionable step that you would tell them to take right now?
Start networking now. I think a lot of people wait until like their senior year to start networking, because, they're getting ready to graduate and they want to find a new job. Start networking now as a freshman even, right? Network to, be involved in business conversations. Make the most of your summers. Start doing internships that are relevant to your skills, especially now with like all the digital skills and things like that. So start networking now.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
One other thing I wanted to mention, I'm sorry, not breaking in, but becoming. A TED Talk is available on YouTube as well.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So I wanted to,
Yeah. TEDx Parish Street.
TEDx Parish Street. Yeah. It was in Durham, North Carolina. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. We'll add all of these to the show notes. Well, thank you, Bobby, for joining us. Dr. Russell, thank you as well.
Happy to be here.
I'm Becky Scott. Thank you all for joining the Business of at Barton School of Business and Innovation.